It's being called the most significant civil rights case in a generation.
And 6 Kentucky couples are among the plaintiffs who have brought the issue to the U.S. Supreme Court. WDRB's Lindsay Allen is in Washington tonight with a look at the arguments of the people who are part of the historic case to decide the future of gay marriage.
Advocates of gay marriage will say this case is about equality and a fundamental right. Those against it will say it's about preserving a sacred institution, states' rights, and what's best for our children. But the Kentucky couples who brought their case here will say it's about something bigger than themselves.
To you, what is this case about?
It's about kids. It's not about us. We did it for the kids coming up behind us.
Luke Barlow and Jimmy Meade have been together since meeting in a Louisville bar in 1968. But much of that life was spent in the closet, much of it painful.
I woke up one morning and my bedroom was over the kitchen. It was a vent, and I heard them talking about their queer son. So it was just kind of hard to take.
The couple had to go to another state to get married and did so in Iowa in 2009. Barlow and Meade joined 5 other couples from Kentucky challenging the state's gay marriage ban. They joined plaintiffs from Ohio, Michigan, and Tennessee in this multi-state case. Many of the couples have adopted children, although in Kentucky, same-sex couples can't adopt the children together.
In the event that one of us passes away, the other is left vulnerable because there's no legal connection to the children, that the other person adopted.
For some of our clients, the issue of what happened end-of-life decisions has become an issue. They want to be treated the same when they go to the hospital with their spouse.
It's about being treated the same as every other family out there.
This denies equal protection of the laws under the 14th Amendment to gay men and lesbians.
The 9 Supreme Court justices will hear arguments for just 2.5 hours on Tuesday. And this entire case has been boiled down to just 2 questions concerning the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which addresses equal protection. Question 1, does the 14th Amendment require a state to license a marriage to 2 people of the same sex? And question 2, does the 14th Amendment require a state to recognize same-sex marriages performed out of state? Lawyers for both sides will try to answer just those questions.
A family with a biological mother and father is the best place for a child to grow up. I mean, the social science evidence is almost unanimous on that point. So the question is whether the state can encourage that, not that exclusively, but have policies that set up an incentive for the maximum number of children to be raised in the best kind of parenting environment.
Martin Cothran represents the Kentucky Family Foundation, which has fought to uphold the state's gay marriage ban.
I seriously do not believe that our children are lacking any love whatsoever. And we believe that the most important thing is for the kids to have 2 loving parents, and that they certainly have.
But that's not the only issue. The Family Foundation also believes the people of Kentucky should decide the future of gay marriage through the state legislature or by the ballot, not the federal government.
It's taking away the right of a state to define it that way, and it's increasing the power of the federal government over issues like this.
You can never allow a civil rights issue to end up on the ballot, which is unfortunately what happened in 2004 in Kentucky and many other states. If we were to put civil rights up for a vote, we might still have slavery, women might not have suffrage. These things are not decided there. We need to compare these laws to the Constitution, which is what's happening now, and we're finding out, as conservative and liberal justices agree, that you really cannot deny LGBT people the right to marry.
The polarizing topic of gay marriage gets even more divisive when you mix in religion.
It makes very clear that God's plan for human sexuality is the plan of a man and a woman united in marriage. And it's just that foundational, and it's actually just that simple.
Or is it? It depends on the church.
I'm the first gay man who's in a partnered relationship to be ordained in the Indiana-Kentucky Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America.
Pastor Renner was ordained this weekend at Frankfort Avenue's Third Lutheran Church.
Gay, lesbian, straight, bisexual questioning. Everybody is welcome here because Our mission is to bring the kingdom of God, which Christ said was being fulfilled in him. And so we should continue that process and love one another as Christ loved us.
But Dr. Albert Mohler, president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, worries what happens next.
Even the logic of those who are pushing this, this revolution in the courts and the law and in morality, they're going to find their own language is pretty hard to stop. When they talk about the right of anyone to get married, that doesn't stop with same-sex couples. You've got major law professors ready to file suit on behalf of those who want polygamous relationships recognized in the law.
You asked me about why people use the Bible against gay people. I think oftentimes it's what's profitable.
It's as big a case as we've had that the Supreme Court is deciding in a generation.
This case is being compared to the likes of Loving versus Virginia, where in 1967, the Supreme Court struck down laws banning interracial marriage.
It's really hard to overstate its importance.
So what is likely to happen? U of L law professor Sam Markison says a high-profile case heard before the U.S. Supreme Court just 2 years ago, U.S. versus Windsor, gives us a clue.
In Windsor, a 5-justice majority held that the federal government had no authority to do anything other than treat those relationships the same. And those 5 justices haven't gone anywhere.
And some believe the case hinges on just one justice.
One man is going to decide this issue, Anthony Kennedy, who's the swing vote on the court.
Recent polls suggest more Americans are in favor of same-sex marriage than in any other point in history. But for the plaintiffs,
we came up at a time when you didn't show your affection. We came up at a time when we never dreamed of marriage.
The advocates.
It further erodes the ideal of a family as a mother and a father raising children.
And the country. History waits to be written. And something to keep in mind about the arguments tomorrow, they are only that, arguments. A decision in this case is not likely until the end of the term in June. Our coverage of this historic case continues tomorrow. In Washington, I'm Lindsay Allen, WDRB News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm David Scott.
And I'm Tamara Evans. Intense interest at the U.S. Supreme Court today as justices heard arguments for and against gay marriage.
WDRB's Lindsay Allen sat in the courtroom as Kentucky couples in the case helped write history.
Kentucky's gay marriage ban argued in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, and what's decided in this case decides the future for the rest of the country. They came by the hundreds to take a stand for gay marriage.
To be here today when this is all coming together is just really the culmination of a dream.
And to take a stand against it.
I feel it's important to stand up for the moral issue of marriage, which is between a man and a woman.
6 Kentucky plaintiffs joined others from Ohio, Michigan, and Tennessee as the Supreme Court heard arguments for 2.5 hours.
To have to fight for it, you know, it's kind of odd, but guess what? We're willing to do it.
Our case will be part of history and will go down as part of history.
The justices heard arguments on 2 questions, both dealing with the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. Do states have the right to issue same-sex marriage licenses? And should gay marriages performed in other states be recognized? Just 5 selected lawyers argued these points while being peppered with questions from the 9 Supreme Court justices.
This definition has been with us for millennia. And it's very difficult for the court to say, oh, well, we know better.
Those who argued on behalf of the plaintiffs said the 14th Amendment guarantees equality under the law and said without gay marriage allowed in every state, it opens up our country to a repeated history of segregation and that it's the duty of the Supreme Court to decide what the 14th Amendment requires. There was even a courtroom outburst from an anti-gay marriage advocate. The attorneys who argued in favor of upholding the state ban say it should not be up to the court to change the definition of marriage and that the people of each state should decide through the democratic process. Lawyers also argued changing the definition opens up the door for more children to be born out of wedlock.
That's not the job of the federal courts, 9 people, to step in and decide for the whole country what something as important as marriage is.
This isn't about state versus federal. This is about the individual and the the individual versus their government.
Once it was over, a moment of reflection from the Louisville lawyer who was the first to take on this case.
It's amazing. Like, we had no idea. We were just trying to do what was best for our clients. We didn't realize we'd be affecting everybody in the country.
And after all of this excitement today, now it's time to wait. The justices aren't expected to announce their decision until the end of June. In Washington, I'm Lindsay Allen, WDRB News. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Lindsay Allen.
And I'm David Scott. Some in Kentuckiana are rejoicing tonight, while others expressing disappointment after the U.S. Supreme Court rules that same-sex marriage is legal in all 50 states.
This historic case was brought in part by 6 Kentucky couples, and we were with them today just after they learned their names will be written in history books. Kentucky plaintiffs Luke and Jimmy Barlow Mead have been a couple for more than 40 years. Married in Iowa in 2009, they've stayed in the closet for most of their lives.
We had never held hands in public. It was just not something that was done. You didn't even think about You didn't even think about people getting married, gay people being married.
President Obama saying the Supreme Court's decision should make America proud.
This ruling will strengthen all of our communities by offering to all loving same-sex couples the dignity of marriage across this great land.
By a 5-4 vote, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that same-sex couples nationwide have the right to marry in all 50 U.S. states, touching off celebrations outside the land's highest court.
Love conquers hate.
The justices said states cannot ban same-sex marriage, overturning the ban in place in Kentucky and in 13 other states. Kentucky plaintiffs joined others from Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee as they challenge gay marriage bans before the U.S. Supreme Court in April. WDRB was inside the courtroom for the arguments in Washington, and it was clear from the questions asked then the justices were deeply divided. That's even more evident by their written opinions. Justice Anthony Kennedy was the pivotal swing vote. In his majority opinion, he wrote, quote, "No union is more profound than marriage, for it embodies the highest ideals of love, fidelity, devotion, sacrifice, and family." But Chief Justice John Roberts said in his dissenting opinion, under the Constitution, judges have power to say what the law is, not what it should be.
Our clients and couples like them all over the country are not second-class citizens. Their relationships are not second-tier relationships.
But Martin Cothran from the Kentucky Family Foundation says the Supreme Court has overstepped its bounds.
This is a Supreme Court that's gone rogue from the Constitution. To say that the Constitution prohibits states from defining marriage as between a man and a woman goes beyond anything that's in the plain language of the Constitution. It goes beyond the plain language of the 14th Amendment, which was the excuse given.
The outcome is the culmination of 2 decades of Supreme Court litigation over gay marriage and gay rights.
Today, we're going to see the end to a lot of very long engagements in the state of Kentucky.
The reason that we're all here is because we have wonderful families, wonderful couples who have deep, deep, meaningful relationships that now no one can deny, not even the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Meanwhile, local couples.
The historic Supreme Court decision legalizing gay marriage all started with 6 couples from Kentucky. In this WDRB special assignment report, we're finding out if they've gotten all they fought for and what life is like for their families.
It's about being treated the same as every other family out there.
To have to fight for it, you know, it's kind of odd, but guess what? We're willing to do it.
This ruling will strengthen all of our communities.
This is a Supreme Court that's gone rogue from the Constitution.
You are a strong people.
My parents have been together for 24 years.
Welcome to a Thursday night at the Campy and Johnson household. Paul and Randy have been together for 24 years and have adopted 4 children: Tevin, Tyler, Mackenzie, and Deshaun. Tevin has only known life with 2 dads.
People ask me this all the time, and I honestly can say, like, I don't know any different. Really, my childhood and even my teenage years, they've just been normal.
Randy Johnson and Paul Campion joined the Kentucky lawsuit against the state's gay marriage ban for one reason: their kids. While the gay marriage ban was in place, the couples couldn't adopt children together.
Legally, I'm the legal parent. And so during those 20 years, Randy hasn't had any legal connection to those boys, even though he raised them equally as I did.
But the ruling gives them both parental rights, and they're in the process of making it legal. It's the same story for plaintiffs Greg Burke and Michael De Leon.
So you did it for your children?
Absolutely. That was always our motivation. The way our lives, I think, has changed the most is that we have started proceedings for a second parent adoption for our 2 children, something that we've longed to do or been waiting to do for about 16 years now.
For Maurice Bojangles Blanchard and Dominique Jones, the Supreme Court ruling finally made this moment possible. They were denied 2 times before, but in June they were finally granted a marriage license at the county clerk's office in Louisville and were soon married.
I still carry the marriage certificate in my cowboy hat.
The 6 couples from Kentucky joined plaintiffs from Ohio, Tennessee, and Michigan in their Supreme Court fight. And out of all the couples involved, Larry Usunza and Tim Love were the very last to be married. They waited until October because that's been their anniversary for 35 years.
We've had so many things taken from us. We didn't want to have this, everybody else decide when our anniversary was going to be. We already had our anniversary and we wanted to keep it.
We were there for their wedding rehearsal at their church in Clifton. The flag draped over the seats at the ceremony was the same flag that was carried on the steps at the U.S. Supreme Court. For the oldest plaintiffs in the case, Luke Barlow and Jimmy Meade, who've been together for 48 years, they say the fight was about paving the road for tomorrow.
We just wanted to make a difference. When I was in high school, I tried to commit suicide 3 times. So that's why we did it, is for the kids coming up behind us.
And for the only Kentucky lesbian couple involved, Kim Franklin and Tammy Boyd.
For us, it's just now a comfort in knowing that the reason we started this journey is now come to be, for our children's sake, for medical reasons for ourselves, and for all those that come along behind us.
But it's not all been smooth sailing. The couples say they were prepared for backlash, but they didn't expect a pushback so contentious, so close to home.
Kim Davis.
When this made national news and people are celebrating a theology of exclusion, it was a huge setback.
And that brings us to another issue that most of these 6 couples continue to be deeply troubled by. The fact that many churches still consider their lives a sin.
Anybody who was questioning whether they would get a relationship with God, this sends a horrible signal.
There are numerous couples in Kentucky who are gay, but there were only 6 couples who went to the U.S. Supreme Court. And I wonder what you tell your children, what you tell yourselves about why you challenge Kentucky's ban.
Throughout this entire thing, all of the plaintiffs have not been in this to say we were right and now we destroy the opposition, but to say we are right.
To allow our kids to see that discrimination has been happening and we can do something about it.
And the couples tell me people from around the world have reached out to them since the June ruling. For them, those messages of thanks and support far outweigh any negative comments.